The station floated in deep space, far from any planet, cold and silent, like it was hiding something dangerous. Inside the station, a secret lab was always awake. Bright white lights, glass walls, and quiet machines filled every corner. People moved fast, but spoke in low voices, as if even sound could cause trouble. Today was not a normal day. Something new had arrived. Something no one fully understood. In the center of the lab, a tall glass chamber stood alone. Inside it sat a small alien child. She looked weak, almost fragile, her body thin, her skin pale with faint glowing lines that moved slowly like soft light underwater. Her eyes were large and dark, watching everything, but trusting nothing. The scientists called her dangerous. They said she carried energy that could destroy entire ships, maybe even more. Machines around her often failed. Lights flickered, screens went blank. No one wanted to go too close. Armed soldiers stood around the chamber, their weapons ready, their fingers tense, waiting for even the smallest movement. But the child did not attack. She did not scream. She only sat there, knees pulled close, small hands shaking. She looked afraid. A senior scientist stepped forward, his voice calm but cold. He gave an order to begin testing. One of the assistants moved closer to the chamber, slowly opening the control panel. The moment he reached toward her, the air changed. A low hum filled the room, soft at first, then growing louder. The lights above began to flicker. Machines started shutting down one by one. The alien child's glowing lines became brighter, her breathing quick and uneven, her eyes wide with fear. "Step back," someone whispered, but it was already too late. The glass chamber began to shake slightly. A thin crack appeared across its surface. Panic spread across the room. Soldiers raised their weapons, aiming directly at the child, fingers ready to fire. "Contain it," the scientist shouted, his voice no longer calm, but the child did not attack. She pressed herself into the corner, her hands covering her head, her small body trembling. The energy in the room grew stronger, like an invisible storm building around her. And then, the main door opened. A man stepped inside, not a soldier, not a scientist, just a low-rank worker, a janitor assigned to clean the outer halls. He paused at the entrance, confused by the chaos. Alarms starting to echo softly through the station. "Get out," someone yelled at him. "This area is restricted." But he did not run. His eyes moved to the glass chamber, to the small figure inside. He saw something different, something the others did not see. He saw a child, slowly. Without thinking too much, he walked forward, ignoring the shouts behind him, ignoring the weapons pointed around the room. "Stop," a guard warned, raising his gun toward him, but the man raised his empty hands, showing he meant no harm, his steps slow, careful, calm. Inside the chamber, the alien child noticed him. Her glowing lines flickered unevenly. Her breathing paused for a moment. The energy in the room shifted, still strong, but no longer rising. The man moved closer, his voice soft, almost like he was speaking to a frightened animal. "It's okay," he said quietly. No one understood why he said that, or what he thought would happen. The soldiers tightened their grip on their weapons, ready for the worst. The scientist watched closely, his mind racing. Inside the chamber, the child slowly lowered her hands, her wide eyes locked onto the man. For a long moment, nothing happened. The room held its breath. Then, slowly, very slowly, she moved. Her small hand lifted, shaking slightly. Reaching forward toward the glass, the man stepped closer, until he stood right in front of the chamber. He hesitated for only a second, then placed his hand gently against the glass. On the other side, the child pressed her hand to the same spot. The moment their hands met, something impossible happened. The hum stopped. The lights became steady again. The machines powered back on. The crack in the glass stopped spreading. The storm was gone. The room fell into complete silence. No one moved, no one spoke. The soldiers slowly lowered their weapons, unsure of what they were seeing. The scientist stared in disbelief. The alien child was calm. She did not look dangerous anymore. She looked safe. Safe. Because of him, and in that silent moment, one truth became clear to everyone in the room. She was not afraid of destruction. She was afraid of them. And for some reason, no one could understand. She only felt safe with one human. The silence in the lab did not last long, but it felt heavy, like the whole station was holding its breath. The alien child was still standing inside the glass chamber, her small hand still pressed where the human's hand had been just moments ago. The energy that once filled the room like a storm was gone, only a soft calm remained, almost unnatural in a place that was always full of alarms and fear. The man did not move away, he just stood there, looking at her through the glass, confused but calm. Behind him, soldiers slowly lowered their weapons, but their eyes stayed sharp, watching every second carefully. The scientists were already speaking into their devices, trying to understand what had just happened, but no one had answers. Her energy dropped to zero the moment he touched the glass, one scientist whispered, his voice full of shock. "That is impossible," another replied. Staring at the monitors, "She has never stabilized before." Inside the chamber, the alien child slowly turned her head. Still looking at the human, her glowing body lines were now soft, fading in and out like a gentle heartbeat. Not dangerous, just alive. She took one small step forward, then another, as if testing the ground, testing the feeling inside her chest. The man noticed it, and instead of stepping back, he gently knelt down so he was closer to her height. He did not speak loudly, he did not give commands. He just stayed there, quiet and still. Something in her expression changed, confusion mixed with something else, something no one in the lab could recognize easily. She lifted her hand again, slowly, but this time not toward the glass, toward him directly. Even though the barrier was still there, she placed her palm against the same point again. As if repeating the connection, the man did the same. A few seconds passed. Nothing dramatic happened. No explosion, no warning signs, just silence. But inside the chamber, her breathing slowed. Her small body relaxed slightly. For the first time since arriving in this place, she was not shaking. A scientist stepped closer to the control panel, his voice low. "This is not control. This is response." "What do you mean?" a soldier asked, not lowering his weapon completely. "She is reacting to him emotionally," the scientist replied, still not fully believing his own words. Inside the chamber, the alien child tilted her head slightly, watching the human carefully. It was like she was trying to understand him, not as a threat, but as something unfamiliar, something new. The man slowly raised one hand, not touching the glass now, just showing he meant no harm. He pointed to himself gently. "Me," he said softly, then pointed toward her. "You." She did not understand the words, but she understood the meaning behind them. There was no anger in his voice, no fear, no command, only calm. Her glowing lines flickered once, then steadied again. A small movement changed everything. She stepped closer to the glass, until her face was just inches away from it. For the first time, the lab could see her eyes clearly. Not as a weapon, not as a subject, but as something fragile. One of the soldiers whispered, "Why is she not attacking?" No one answered, because no one had ever seen this before. A dangerous alien entity that should have been destroying everything was instead watching a human like she was waiting for permission to exist. The man slowly stood up again, staying close, but not forcing anything. He took a small step to the side, and to everyone's surprise, she followed his movement with her eyes. It was not control. It was trust beginning to form in the smallest possible way. The head scientist finally spoke, his voice tight. "We need to document this. Every second of it." But even as he said it, he looked uncertain, like he was watching something that should not exist in their records. The alien child pressed her forehead lightly against the glass, as if tired, as if finally letting herself rest for a moment. The man stayed there, just watching her, not speaking, not moving away. And in that strange silence, something began to change inside the station. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with curiosity and something deeper. Something no one wanted to name yet, because if this child truly was dangerous, then none of this made sense. But if she was not dangerous, then everything they believed about her was wrong. And the only person she seemed to understand in this entire place was the human standing quietly in front of her. Inside the secret station, nothing felt normal anymore. The alien child was still inside the glass chamber, but the fear around her had changed shape. It was no longer just fear of destruction. Now it was fear of misunderstanding something important. Scientists moved quickly behind their screens, recording every movement she made, every change in her energy, every small flicker in the glowing lines under her skin. The human worker was still there too, standing close to the chamber, as if he had become part of the experiment without even trying. No one had ordered him to stay, but no one had the courage to send him away either, because whenever he was near, the strange energy inside the child stayed calm. A senior scientist finally spoke, breaking the long silence. "We need to understand what she is," he said, his voice serious. "This is not normal behavior for her species." He turned toward a large screen, where hidden data files began to appear. Old alien war reports, classified records, broken transmissions from past encounters. The truth started to form slowly, like pieces of a puzzle no one wanted to see clearly. "She is not just a child," another scientist said quietly. "She is from a lineage classified as high-risk energy carriers." The room grew colder with those words. Soldiers tightened their grip on their weapons again. Even though nothing had changed physically, the child inside the chamber noticed the shift. Her glowing lines flickered again, her small body tensed slightly, but she did not move away from the human. Instead, she stayed close to the side where he stood, as if he was the only stable thing in her world. The scientist continued. "Her kind was involved in planetary collapse events," he said. "Entire colonies disappeared when their powers activated uncontrolled." A heavy silence followed. The human finally spoke for the first time since the explanation began. "She is not a weapon," he said calmly. Still looking at the child, "She is scared." No one replied to him, because his words did not match the data they were reading. Inside the chamber, the alien child slowly sat down again, her eyes never leaving him. It was clear now. She was not reacting to the scientists, not reacting to the soldiers, only to him. The head scientist stepped closer to the glass, studying her carefully. "We may be seeing a bonding response," he muttered, "but it should not be possible at this level." He turned to the human. "Did you do something to her?" The man shook his head slowly. "I just didn't treat her like a threat," he answered simply. Those words created another silence, heavier than before, because in this place, everything was treated as a threat first. The child tilted her head slightly, as if listening even though she did not understand human language fully. Her glowing lines pulsed softly, almost like they were reacting to emotion instead of power. A scientist activated a low-frequency scan, trying to measure her response. The machine beeped rapidly at first, then slowed, then stabilized completely. "She is stabilizing again," someone said in disbelief. The soldier commander frowned. "Or she is adapting." But the human stepped closer to the glass again. Ignoring the tension building behind him, the child immediately reacted, moving closer as well, placing her small hand against the glass again. The energy spike everyone expected did not happen. Instead, the readings showed something strange. Synchronization. Her biological signals were matching his proximity, his calmness, his heartbeat pattern from the scanner. It was like she was copying peace from him. The scientists looked at each other, unsure if this was control or trust. But the human only looked at her and spoke softly again. "You are not dangerous," he said. "You are just alone." The words had no scientific meaning, but the effect was immediate. The child's eyes softened slightly, her body relaxing in a way no one had recorded before. One scientist whispered, "This is emotional resonance," another replied, "or dependency." But neither explanation felt complete, because what they were seeing was not a machine responding, not a weapon activating. It was something far more human than anyone expected from an alien being. Inside the chamber, the child slowly placed both hands against the glass now, like she was trying to stay connected. The human mirrored her again without thinking, and for a brief moment, the entire lab stopped recording, stopped speaking, stopped analyzing. Because in that moment, there was no experiment, only a child who was no longer afraid. and a human who somehow became the only place in the universe she felt safe. The station had changed after that moment, but no one wanted to admit it out loud. The alien child was still inside the glass chamber, yet the way people looked at her was no longer the same. Fear was still there, but now it was mixed with doubt, confusion, and growing curiosity. The human worker was still standing nearby, like a silent shield between her and everyone else. He was not a soldier, not a scientist, just a simple man who was never supposed to be important in a place like this. But somehow, everything reacted to him, especially her. The head scientist finally made a decision. "We will conduct a controlled stimulation test," he said, his voice firm, but not fully confident. The soldiers moved into position again, more carefully this time. The child inside the chamber noticed the change immediately. Her body tensed. Her glowing lines brightened slightly, like warning lights waking up inside her skin. She looked toward the human, not the scientists. That small detail did not go unnoticed. The human stepped closer to the glass and, without thinking, placed his hand near the same spot again. For a second, she calmed. But this time, something was different. A technician activated a small energy pulse inside the chamber, a controlled signal designed to test her reaction. At first, nothing happened. Then the air shifted. A low vibration filled the room, deep and unsettling, like something sleeping inside the child had just opened one eye. Her glowing lines brightened rapidly, spreading across her arms and neck like burning light under her skin. Her breathing changed, faster, uneven. The machines around the lab began to flicker again. Alarms warning of unstable energy spikes. "Containment holding at 78%, someone shouted. But the scientist frowned. "It's reacting too strongly to a simple pulse." Inside the chamber, the alien child stepped back quickly, her hands pressing against her head, as if the sound inside her mind had become too loud. The human noticed immediately. "Stop it," he said sharply, turning toward the control team. But they did not stop. "We need full data," the scientist replied. "We are close to understanding her limits." That word changed everything. Limits. Inside the chamber, the child's fear surged again. And with it, the energy responded. The glass began to vibrate, thin cracks forming like spiderwebs across its surface. Soldiers raised their weapons again, panic returning to their faces. "Shut it down," the commander ordered. But before anyone could act, the human moved. He stepped directly in front of the chamber, blocking her view of the scientists. He did not shout, he did not threaten, he simply stood there and spoke in a calm, steady voice. "Look at me," he said softly. "Not them." Inside the chamber, the child hesitated. Her glowing lines flickered violently for a moment, then slowly started to stabilize again. Her eyes shifted from the machines to him. The vibration in the room began to fade slightly, but the test signal was still active, still pushing her limits. A scientist whispered, "She is resisting the overload." Because of him, the human took a slow step closer to the glass again, and placed both hands against it, completely ignoring the danger signs flashing around him. The child reacted instantly, pressing her hands against the same point. For a brief second, the energy spike stopped growing, but then a deeper surge activated, triggered by fear buried too deep inside her biology. The chamber shook violently. Alarms screamed across the lab. "She is going critical." Someone shouted. The soldiers aimed their weapons at the chamber again, ready for destruction if needed. But the human did not move away. Instead, he leaned closer to the glass and spoke again, softer this time. "You are safe," he said. "You are not alone." Inside the chamber, the child's eyes trembled for a moment. It looked like she might lose control completely, but then something changed. She reached forward, not in attack, but in instinct, grabbing toward the only stable presence she recognized. The human placed his forehead against the glass, closing the distance as much as he could. And in that exact moment, everything stopped. The vibration ended. The alarms silenced. The energy spike collapsed like a wave hitting a wall. Silence returned again, heavier than before. Inside the chamber, the child slowly lowered her hands, her breathing returning to a fragile calm. The human stayed still, not moving away, not afraid. Behind him, the entire lab was frozen, watching what should have been impossible. Because the system said she should have lost control. But she didn't. She chose calm instead, and once again, the only reason she did was the human standing in front of her. After the incident, the entire station changed its behavior, but not its rules. The alien child was still locked inside the glass chamber, but now she was no longer just a subject of fear. She had become a subject of conflict between control and understanding. The human worker was still assigned near her, but now under strict observation. Every movement he made was recorded. Every word he spoke was analyzed. The scientists had divided into two groups. One believed she was a dangerous entity being stabilized by emotional bonding. The other believed she was simply a frightened child reacting to kindness. But neither side had full control over what was happening anymore, because she only responded to him, and that was becoming a problem for the system. Late in the station cycle, when most lights were dimmed and the lab was quieter, a meeting was held behind closed doors. The head scientist stood in front of a holographic display showing the alien child's energy readings. "This cannot continue," he said firmly. "We are losing scientific control of the subject." A military officer responded immediately. "Then we extract her," he said. "We move her to a secured containment facility and remove external influence." Everyone understood what that meant. Remove him. The human worker, who had become the anchor point of her stability, was now officially considered an interference factor. Inside the observation room, the human was unaware of the full decision being made. He was simply sitting near the chamber, watching her sleep-like stillness. She was calmer now, not asleep, but resting in a way she never did before. Like her body finally trusted the silence around her. But suddenly, her eyes opened. Slowly, she turned her head toward him, not toward the soldiers, not toward the scientists, only toward him. And for the first time, there was something different in her expression. Not fear, not confusion, but awareness, as if she had sensed something before it was spoken. Moments later, alarms did not sound, but something more subtle happened. Security doors shifted into lockdown mode across the outer sections of the lab. The human noticed immediately, standing up slowly. Something was wrong. A guard entered the room, avoiding eye contact. "You are being reassigned," he said flatly. "Effective immediately." The human understood without needing explanation. He looked toward the chamber. Inside, the alien child had already stood up. Watching the interaction carefully, her glowing lines began to pulse again. Not violently, but unevenly, like uncertainty spreading through her body. "They are moving her," another voice said from behind. "A scientist this time. This is a precautionary measure." The human stepped forward instinctively. "She doesn't understand what is happening," he said. "You can't just move her like equipment." But the officer remained calm. "She is not safe in her current state of dependency," he replied. "And neither are we." Inside the chamber, the child's energy fluctuated slightly, reacting to the rising emotional tension in the room. The human turned back to her, and for the first time, he realized she was watching everything, understanding more than they believed. He walked closer to the glass again, ignoring the guard's warning. "I will come back," he said softly, placing his hand near hers. But before he could finish, the lockdown protocol activated. A separation field slowly began to form around the chamber, a containment barrier designed to isolate her completely from external influence. The child noticed it immediately. Her eyes widened slightly, and her body tensed. The glowing lines across her skin brightened again, not as an attack, but as a reaction to fear. "No," the human said sharply, turning toward the controls. "You are stressing her again." But the system continued. The barrier began to close between them, slowly, deliberately, like a wall being built in real time. The child moved forward instinctively, pressing both hands against the glass again, searching for him. The human did the same from the outside, matching her movement. For a brief moment, their hands aligned through the narrowing space, and then the barrier completed. A final separation. The room fell silent. On one side, the child stood alone inside the chamber. On the other, The human stood separated by reinforced containment energy. She did not panic immediately, but her body reacted, her energy rising in waves, trying to find stability that was no longer there. The scientists watched carefully, expecting escalation. But what they saw instead was different. She did not attack, she searched. Her eyes moved across the room, finally locking onto him again. And the moment she saw him, her energy stabilized slightly. Not fully calm, but no longer breaking. The human pressed his hand against the barrier, even though it no longer allowed contact. "I am here," he said softly. Inside, she mirrored the gesture, placing her hand where his would have been. The system recorded the data as a failure of isolation, but the human understood something else. The separation did not break the connection. It only proved how real it was. And as the station prepared to relocate her, one truth became clear to everyone watching. She was not reacting to control. She was reacting to loss, and the only thing keeping her stable in a world that feared her was still the same human they were about to take away. The transfer operation was scheduled in silence. No celebration, no announcement, only quiet tension spreading through the station like a slow poison. The alien child was no longer in the central lab chamber. She had been moved into a reinforced mobile containment unit, deeper inside the station, away from direct contact. The human worker had been officially removed from her access clearance, but unofficially, everyone knew he was still the problem they could not fully erase. Inside the containment unit, the child stood alone, surrounded by glowing barrier fields and soft mechanical hums. But for the first time since her arrival, she was not calm. Her glowing lines pulsed irregularly, sometimes bright, sometimes fading. Like a heartbeat losing rhythm, she was not attacking, she was waiting. And that waiting was becoming dangerous in its own way. Outside, in the control corridor, the head scientist spoke quietly with security officers. "We proceed with extraction to the orbital facility," he said. "Full separation from external influence is required," the officer nodded. But there was hesitation in his eyes, because everyone knew what external influence meant now. It meant him. The human was sitting in a restricted room nearby, no longer allowed near her, but still present in the station's core area. He had not spoken much since the separation, but he had not left either. He kept looking at the sealed doors, as if distance itself was something he could solve just by standing close enough. Then suddenly, alarms did not sound loudly, but softly. A warning tone spread through the station systems. Containment instability. The scientists rushed to the monitors. Inside the mobile unit, the alien child had moved closer to the barrier wall. Her hands pressed against it, not pushing, but searching. Her energy readings were rising again, not violently, but steadily, like pressure building inside something fragile. "She is destabilizing," a technician said quickly, "without external contact. She is losing equilibrium." The scientist narrowed his eyes. "It is not loss," he said slowly. "It is separation response." Outside the containment corridor, the human suddenly stood up. He felt it before he saw it. Something shifting in the air, something familiar turning unstable again. "I need to go there," he said immediately. Walking toward the sealed exit, security stepped in front of him. "Access denied," the guard replied. Firm, but uneasy. But the human did not stop. "Then open it," he said calmly, "or she will break again." Inside the unit, the child's energy spike increased slightly. Not destructive yet, but rising faster now. She had started pacing, her small hands touching every surface, as if searching for something missing in every direction. Then she stopped, her head turned sharply, toward the direction she had sensed before. The human, and at that exact moment, across multiple floors, systems began to flicker again. Not because of attack, but because of synchronization failure. The station was no longer stable without their connection in close range. The head scientist finally made a decision. "Bring him in," he said reluctantly. "Controlled reintroduction only." Security hesitated, but obeyed. The human was escorted quickly through corridors, past warning lights and locked doors, until he reached the containment access zone. The moment he arrived, everything inside the unit shifted. The child stopped moving completely. Her energy stabilized slightly, Like a breath she had been holding finally released halfway. When the barrier opened just enough for visual contact, she saw him. And for the first time since separation, she did not press against the walls. She stepped forward slowly. The human did not rush. He simply stood where he was, calm and steady. "She is responding instantly," a technician whispered, watching the data spike settle. Inside, the child raised her hand, unsure at first, then more confident. The human mirrored her again, placing his hand against the transparent barrier. But this time, something different happened. The barrier did not stabilize her fully. It reacted to her emotion instead of suppressing it. The system began fluctuating, unable to decide whether this was threat or harmony. "She is not unstable," the scientist said slowly, realization forming in his voice. "She is emotionally dependent on proximity," the officer frowned. "That is still instability." "No," the scientist replied. "That is attachment." Inside the unit, the alien child moved closer until her forehead touched the barrier again. But this time, there was no panic, only relief. Her energy slowly began to settle, not because she was controlled, but because she was not alone again. The human stayed still, watching her carefully, then spoke softly. "They tried to move you away," he said, "but I am still here." She did not understand all the words, but she understood the meaning, and in response, her glowing lines dimmed gently, like a storm finally losing strength. For the first time since separation, the station recorded a stable reading without suppression fields, but the scientists knew the truth now. She was not stabilized by technology. She was stabilized by him, and as the transfer decision was reviewed again, in silence, one reality became impossible to ignore. If they took him away completely, they would not be removing a guard. They would be breaking the only anchor keeping something unknown from becoming uncontrollable. And no one was sure anymore whether that unknown was danger or trust or something in between. The decision came quietly, without celebration or warning, like all the most important decisions in the station always did. The alien child was no longer being prepared for transfer, at least not immediately. The scientists had paused everything after seeing the repeated stabilization events linked to the human presence. But paused did not mean safe. It only meant uncertain. Inside the containment unit, the child was still there. But now the environment had changed again. Fewer aggressive systems, fewer shock protocols, more observation and controlled silence. She stood near the transparent barrier, her small hands resting against it, not pressing hard, just waiting. And on the other side, the human stood the same way, calm but tired, as if he had been pulled between systems and fear for too long. Neither of them moved away anymore. It was like distance itself had become uncomfortable for both. The scientists watched from a separate control room, their screens filled with emotional response graphs, energy stability curves, and behavioral predictions that kept failing every time they tried to finalize them. "She is not reacting like a weapon," one of them said quietly, "and not like a test subject either." "Then what is she reacting like?" the officer asked, arms crossed. The scientist hesitated, then answered honestly, "Like a child." That word created a silence heavier than alarms ever did, because it changed the entire meaning of what they had been doing since the moment she arrived. Inside the unit, the alien child slowly tilted her head, watching the human carefully. Her glowing lines were soft now, steady, no longer flashing in unstable bursts. It was not full control, but it was peace, fragile and temporary. The human knelt down slowly, so he was closer to her level, like before. He placed his hand gently against the barrier again, not as an experiment, but as a habit of reassurance. She copied him immediately, her small palm matching his position exactly. The synchronization reading spiked for a second, then stabilized again. The scientist leaned forward. "It is not suppression," he said. "It is mutual regulation." The officer frowned. "Explain." "They stabilize each other," the scientist replied. "Removal of either destabilizes both systems." That statement changed the atmosphere completely, because now it was not about control anymore. It was about dependency, and dependency was harder to manage than danger. Inside the containment unit, the human spoke again, softly. I don't know what they will do next, he said, eyes on her. But I am still here for now. The child blinked slowly, processing the tone more than the language. Then, something unexpected happened. She placed her forehead gently against the barrier, closing her eyes, not in fear, not in panic, but in trust. The room outside went completely silent for a moment. Even the machine seemed to slow, as if reacting to the emotional weight of the moment. One technician whispered, "She is not stabilizing because she is controlled. She is stabilizing because she feels safe." The officer looked away for a moment, as if unsure how to respond to that kind of truth. Because safety was not part of their protocol language, but it was now part of the data they could not ignore. Hours passed like that, with minimal movement. Just presence on both sides of the barrier. No commands, no tests, no spikes, just quiet observation. Then the final directive came from higher command. A decision had been made. Not extraction, not termination, but relocation under Joint Observation Protocol. The human was to remain attached to her unit as a permanent contact point, under strict monitoring. It was not freedom, but it was not separation either. When the announcement reached the control room, the scientist exhaled slowly, like he had been holding that breath since the beginning of the experiment. Inside the unit, the child reacted differently, not with fear, not with aggression, but with immediate recognition. She looked at the human, as if sensing the shift in outcome before it was spoken aloud. The human did not smile. He simply nodded slightly, as if confirming something he already expected. "I guess they are not taking you away," he said quietly. The child did not understand the full meaning, but she understood the emotion behind it, relief. Her glowing lines softened even more, becoming faint, like quiet light instead of unstable energy. And for the first time, the system recorded something it could not classify properly. Not instability, not control, not threat, but continuity. A connection that remained stable even under observation, even under pressure, even under fear. The scientist looked at the data and spoke slowly. "This is no longer containment," he said. "This is coexistence." Outside, the human remained seated near the barrier, and inside, the alien child stayed close to him, separated only by reinforced glass and science that no longer fully understood what it was witnessing. But one thing was clear to everyone watching. She was not dangerous in his presence. And he was not just a worker anymore. He had become something else entirely. Not a guard, not a scientist, not a subject handler, but the only place in the universe where she felt safe enough to simply exist.